The Black Forest by KB Hurst. All legends are born from some actual event. It is a story passed down from each generation until it no longer resembles the original. The legend of the Goat Man is similar to that of the one about the Jersey Devil. He too was born in darkness. The great stories of the Goat Man popped up mainly in the 1970s. That a scientist in Beltsville was doing radical experimental research, and one of his experiments escaped the Beltsville, Maryland laboratory and began his killing spree on unsuspecting victims in Beltsville, including one dog. Just another urban legend, they say. Only the story I'm about to tell you is not fiction. This one is entirely true, and you'll remember it once you've heard it. It began one Hallows Eve about 35 years ago, when all the teenagers were out drinking, partying, and burning fires in the Black Forest, near a town you'd swear was fictional if you heard its name. You'd never find it exactly searching for it on a map. It was a town so small it had only 667 residents. You see, it's pointless to say where or give you the name of the town, because then you'd search for it, only to declare my story was pure flash fiction. I only want to tell you my story, though, as a warning. So as it was, October 30th, 35 years ago now, my friends Donnie, Teresa, Mac, Kevin, and I were having fun in the Black Forest. When I say Black Forest, I do in fact mean black. I'm also not referring to the famous Black Forest of Germany. The tree trunks on the old oaks and pines were quite dense, causing an almost blind spot whenever you tried to peer any further than 5 feet in front of you. Luckily, most of us had grown up near these forests and had a good idea of how to get in and out. Most importantly, leave. So we were chatting when one of my friends, Donnie, decided to play Never Have I Ever. He was the leader of our pack of misfits. Donnie, a linebacker at our high school and one of the most well-to-do guys we knew. You know, one of those where his family had all the pool in town, and it overflowed into Donnie. We wholeheartedly worshipped him. As a stupid game as there ever was, Donnie asked Teresa the first question. Teresa, never have I ever gone down on Mark. His laugh was evil, as he already knew she had. We all knew she had. I have never, she said, glaring at Donnie. I think you're lying, but okay. Donnie looked at Teresa again, this time winking at her. I rolled my eyes because it was now all about Donnie's jealousy of how Teresa's relationship with Mark and, you know, how she had chosen Mark over Donnie. One of those love triangle situations. Come on, this is stupid. Let's play something else, I said, soon wishing I hadn't made the suggestion. Donnie now looked at me wickedly. I had seen that look when we played football together. All right, Brian. Truth or dare? Seriously? Yes, I am. Dare, I said. I wasn't about to let Donnie put me on the spot by telling my secrets. Not that I had any, but Donnie would find something about me to turn into a scandal, I was sure. All right, I dare you to walk about 10 feet into the woods and stay there no matter what happens. That would be easy. I stood up, chugged the rest of my beer, then walked 10 feet into the forest. I stood there for a few minutes, and then I heard laughter. Donnie had put out the fire, so now I couldn't see where everybody was or how to get back to our camping area. I could only see pure darkness. Fucker, I thought. Okay, hilarious, Donnie. You know I can't see shit now. Where are you? I'm over here, he called back. It sounded like he was on the left of me, so I began to walk in the direction that I heard him. But then I heard Teresa call out, "Hey!" And then Mac and Kevin called out in 2 other directions. Come on, guys. Over here, Teresa called. Her voice sounded a tad worried. I went in her direction. As I walked about 10 feet, I found myself suddenly turned around in the forest. I called out again. This time, I was waiting for someone to call back. I was now furious with all of them. Come on, guys, this isn't funny. Nothing. The sound of the leaves in the distance was all I could hear. I tried to listen to see if I could hear their footsteps. I heard nothing. I was beginning to feel chill now. Something was off. Suddenly, the dark forest took on a life of its own. I could no longer recognize the trees. They appeared to be moving apart. I watched now, as fog appeared from out of nowhere. Now, I felt the temperature drop again. Only this time, I began to shiver and shake. The air continuously dropped in temperature until the ice formed on my upper lip. Paralyzed by cold, my fears seemed far off as I struggled to put my head around what was happening. Then, I saw him. There was a dim light coming from my left, and as I managed to turn to see what was causing the light, I could make out the strange head of a goat. I blinked. The tiny icicles from my lashes I tried to focus. I tried to understand what I was seeing. About 6 feet in front of me was what appeared to be the large head of a goat. Its horns were light gray. Its eyes were yellow gold. Its fur black as night, except for the grayish hair on its chin. Its fur was black, shiny, and thick as a fur coat from Macy's in winter. It looked soft and almost pleasant. It stood on 3 legs, almost floating in my direction. Then I heard a crack. It appeared to be morphing into a man, only his hooves now lifted from the ground as he stood on 2 of his 3 legs. He towered nearly 8, or was it 10, feet above me. I stood looking at him and could barely feel the piss running down my legs. It inched forward, and I belted out a scream. And then it screamed in my face. I fell back now and realized I needed to run. As I ran, I heard other screams. I pray I had reached the forest edge, but I had yet to find it. I heard the heavy footsteps of the goat man all around me as I tore through the dense woods. I ran until I found what looked like a clearing. I entered the clearing and I realized it was our campsite, but nobody was around. I noticed Donnie's jacket hanging from one of the tree branches. I picked it up and saw there was blood on it. Panicked, I ran in the direction of where the car was. I opened the door to the driver's side, but when I did, I found Teresa just sitting there staring into space. The other 2 that were there with us were just sitting in the back seat. They too were staring into space. "We have to go!" I yelled. Teresa sat there, and Mac and Kevin sat in the back. All 3 of them looked like death. Finally, Teresa woke from her gaze. She was disoriented, and tears were falling from her face as she slowly realized it was me. Donnie. He's gone. They took him. What? I asked, but I already had a feeling. The dark ones, she said. I looked at her and then pushed her aside. I started the car, speeding out of the area and down a dark, desolate dirt road. I saw shadows overcast onto the street as we approached the main road. It was as if the shadows were following our every move. We reached the main road, but just as we were about to turn into it, a giant tree fell in front of our vehicle, blocking our passage. I slammed on the brakes, trying to avoid a collision. The car stopped, and Mac tapped me on the shoulder. "Brian, what the hell is that?" I turned to see what it was, and all I could make out was a giant shadow with two bright globes for eyes. It moved slowly over the vehicle and then stopped to lean into the front of the car. Two burning eyeballs glared at the four of us. I felt the car getting hot. Fuck. This thing was using the heat in its eyes to crack the windshield. We all screamed as a crack went slowly down the window until it fell onto our laps. I followed Teresa as she climbed into the back seat. Mac and Kevin struggled to open one of the doors to escape the car. Mac managed to open the door, but as he did, the creature suddenly grabbed him. Its eyes were no longer burning with 10,000 fires. Instead, I looked at the beast and recognized it as the giant goat man. His form had shifted into a much larger version of what I had encountered in the dark forest earlier. The creature held up Mac, threw him into the air, and then bit off his head, quieting Mac's screams. It was as if he were just biting into chicken wings. The rest of us ran from the creature as fast as we could, using the headlights from the car as a guide. We all ended up back in the forest with its bleak coldness. I tried to find a way to keep us all together, but soon Kevin was screaming as the goat man pulled his loins apart. It was the only thing the light from the headlights afforded me, as they too were suddenly snuffed out. Now, we were left in utter darkness. The air shifted, and a strange smell permeated into our nostrils. It smelled of filth. I felt Teresa run smack into me as she could no longer run. "We have to get out of here, Brian." "I know," I said, pulling her from the cold, mud-caked earth. It was hard to run in it, and it felt like quicksand. Its murky void pushed against our feet, nearly holding us in place for the monster at our backs. We stood momentarily getting our bearings, when I had an idea. "Do you have a lighter?" I asked her. Yeah," she said, reaching into her pocket. I took the lighter into my hands and then searched for something to light the fire. I flicked the lighter a couple of times to search for branches to turn into a torch. I found some green wood and bark. It was dry enough. It would be easy to light and easier to burn. I bent down and doing my shoelace, wrapping the lace around a large stick and attaching the other bark and green wood as a torch. I needed something to help light our way, but the fire could also be a good defense source. Having only seconds to do this, I flicked the match. The tip of the wood lit up, but then a cold gust of wind blew it out. I could no longer hear the goatman, which was not good. I knew he was close behind us. Teresa was freaking out, trying to block the wind as the fire finally lit up on our man-made torch. We ran deeper into the woods, hoping we could find cover or a hiding spot from the goatman. Teresa ran at my side as we stumbled over branches and avoiding hitting ourselves. The torch began to pick up momentum, and then the heat caused me to drop it, just along a small clearing of trees. It burst into flames. The fire grew, and I thought of creating a fire circle around us as protection. I wasn't sure it would last, but we had to try something or else perish in the process. We struggled to get as much forest around us lit with fire, but tried to keep it far enough that the fire would not burn us. We watched as the looming shadow in the distance came closer, blocked out all of the darkness around us until there was nothing but emptiness. I grabbed Teresa's hand and held it tightly as we waited for the goatman to approach. Now we were face to face with it. It appeared to grow like night above us, and the fire and I stood, paralyzed, waiting to see what mayhem it would cause. I took in a bated breath, Teresa watching the creature. She suddenly dropped my hand. She turned away from the direction that we were looking at the goat man in. She was now looking behind me. Her brown eyes reflected the flames of the fire shelter we'd built. Then she looked upward. All the while, I kept my eyes on the goat man. Suddenly, without warning, she flew above my head into the mouth of another large creature. This one was pale white. Its body had no hair, no eyes, only a large mouth. The goat man screamed a screeching sound, piercing my ears until I felt them start to bleed. The pale creature then crept down from the tree it was in, walking on all fours like a giant spider. The goat man tried to attack the pale humanoid, but to no avail. As he made a motion to grab it, the movement caused a gust of air to wipe out the fire. I froze now, closing my eyes as I waited for the goat man to swipe down upon me and pick me up, devouring me in one gulp as he had done all of my friends. But in the distance, the sun began to rise. I could now see the main road in the distance, which was only about 50 yards from where I stood. The goat man was still in hot pursuit of the pale crawler when it saw me make a run for it. Using all the strength I had in me, something told me if I just make it to the main road, I'd be safe. I ran and got within 3 feet of the road when I felt the goat man swipe to pick me up. Putting his gross mouth around my body, I slid between his teeth and his tongue. My screams filled the forest of nothingness with a pin drop of sound. Its foot then got close to the sun, and then it dropped me onto the concrete. I screamed, feeling my left shoulder crack like a stick. The sound was devastating, but when I looked at the goat man, he had been stung by the light of the sun's rays. I cried now, thinking only 2 thoughts. I knew I was safe, but I had 5 miles to walk before I got into town. I managed to stand as the goat man screamed again, knocking me over again with a sound. It was him versus me now, and no matter what he threw my way, I had to escape. I stood as much of a crawl. I screamed back, letting the beast know I would not be afraid. He towered 20 feet above me like some supernatural ghost, but I still saw he could bleed. The sun grew brighter as a cloud moved out of its way. The sun rose brighter, causing him to retreat further into the black forest. It was actually afraid of the sun. Luck was on my side as I managed to stand, walking as fast as my feet could carry me until I burst into a sprint. My shoulders stabbed against the pavement with every step onto the pavement, causing me to wail. It seemed hours I ran. It was hours that it took me to reach the edge of town. Yet as I got closer, I noticed eyes watching me from the blackness of the forest. The goat man was not the only thing lurking inside of it. I was afraid that something might leap from the forest and eat me, but while their strange glowing eyes followed me, none left the woods to attack me. When I reached the sign that gave the name of my town, and I was back to civilization again, I was grabbed by a man whose arms I collapsed in. "Son, are you all right?" My eyes closed as I heard him call for help. As I was held in his arms, I looked back towards those woods and wished I hadn't. There were thousands of glowing eyes, all staring back at me. That was when I realized the forests were alive. Not just your normal woodland creatures, but everything you'd ever suspected and then some, were in those woods. To this day, I don't go into any forests, especially at night. I can promise the legend of the infamous Goat Man is real, as are the Pale Crawlers, Dogmen, and the rest. Do I believe they were manufactured by a mad scientist? I cannot say for sure. I only know they were real, live creatures. And how they came about is anyone's guess. You don't have to believe my story. It's just a story to you, right?